You know, I sat down and I said to myself today, Tennessee Fats, you should record a video that's just a fireside chat where you talk and you give people an idea of what you think, because you've read some books that have really sort of crushed, I guess, what your childhood dreams were of what you thought the comic industry was. I did. I read some books. There's a danger in reading, and knowledge has its cost, and it's kind of scary how easily that sort of jumped up here and sort of bit me in the ass. Because now I have to ask myself, what am I going to do going forward? And do I want to do this anymore? I'll show you these two books. Here, see this one? I've already showed you this one, I think, once. When I got this, I showed you this. I read this, and it really showed me how Jack Kirby just got royally screwed basically throughout his entire career. All the way up to the end. Just screwed every step of the way by every business partner that he did. Well, that's not true. I can't say that. Not every business partner. He just got screwed every step of the way with most of the business decisions he made. And intellectual property, which wasn't really a concept in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Well, it was, but not really a major concept. Came back to be a bigger issue later in his life. And I thought, that comic industry is really gritty. It can't actually be that bad, can it? Yeah, it can. I read this. Now, granted, I'm gonna caveat this. This is published by Two Morrows. You see that over there? That's the same company that produces the Jack Kirby Collector. So some people could watch this video and they could claim, well, that's a biased source there because it's, you've got that thing there from the Jack Kirby Collector. So obviously it's going to support the Jack Kirby argument of things. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. This is actually fairly objective. And I give the guy who put this together a lot of props. John Morrow is his name. And what he did here was he took all the contemporaneous quotes from everybody involved in what was the Marvel era, which Frank Miller later renamed the Jack Kirby era. And it says, this is how we created Marvel Comics. And it's interesting that when you read the initial information, everybody has a clear idea. This is who created this person in this method at this time, and this is why. Everything was clear. Stan, Jack, get together, go. Here's what you're creating, have a thing. And they did it for a lot of things. And there are other things where it was just, Jack, go. Steve Ditko, go. Don Heck, maybe. Wally Wood, go. Absolutely. All these artists were just sort of go. And they did, they created. But what happened over time was, and I think this was a very decisive choice made by Martin Goodman at Marvel Comics, was, and I think Stan, unfortunately, was drawn into this and carried through it. And you'll get a sense of that when you read this, is that Martin was trying to crystallize the value, the equity of Marvel Comics for an eventual sale. And when that happened was, toes got stepped on. Who owned what, where, and when blended. And everything fell into Marvel. Everything fell into Stan Lee and the Mighty Marvel Way, and him recording intros on videos with, hey, Action Hero fans and all that sort of fun stuff, which is great, fantastic. I love Stan Lee. But do you love what Marvel Comics did, or do you love Stan Lee the individual? Stan Lee the individual, I have no issues with. I think the guy did the best he could at the time, and I think he legitimately was looking out for the people around him. And I think, based on everything I'm hearing from people who talk about him, they all talk about being a really friendly and outgoing guy. And to me, that's, and when you hear it again and again and again from different sources, that tells you this is a friendly, outgoing guy. And he's not a bad guy. But I think the business side of things in Marvel and then later in DC, I think it really screwed over a lot of artists. And I hate to say it, but I think Jack Kirby got royally effed in his career. And it's tough. It is really tough to read that, because Jack Kirby was one of my favorite artists. And one of my favorite comics is The Forever People, which he did at DC. And that Fourth World thing over there was going to be his magnum opus. It was going to be him writing it. He wanted to end Thor and Asgard over at Marvel so that he can move into the new gods. Forget the old gods, we're going to the new gods. I'm Jack Kirby and I've created it, and this is what it's going to be. It's going to be fantastic. And it was going to be fantastic. And then Carmine Infantino came in and said, no, and you're stopping. And I got to tell you, I can't argue with the business decision. If it ain't selling, it ain't selling. And you've got to move books. I can argue with the results in that I don't get the end. And I don't like that, but that's something else altogether. So it upsets me when Jack Kirby, who's one of my favorite artists, really just gets hosed. Now, after the fact, there was a settlement, by my understanding, and money was paid to Jack's family, and all sorts of caveats are going to be all over the movies now, saying created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It's going to be a co-creator thing, which is what it should have been all along, which is great. But it's sad that they have to fight to that level, to the point where it gets to where they are now. And it's interesting because reading this now, I'm starting to understand why the guys broke off from Marvel and created Image Comics in the 90s, because they were talking about intellectual property rights then, and owning their characters and controlling their characters. And it's, I tell you, as a teenager, I was reading this, why do you want to do what? You're working for Marvel, why would you? But now I get it, I really do. And it's unfortunate that this, as I said earlier, that you have to get to the point where you're fighting you leave your employer and your publishing house to get control over what you do. And that sort of pulled the veil back for me for comics in the industry. So I don't have an answer right now as to what I'm going to do next, what I'm going to buy next. For those of you who don't know, I have bought a lot of Marvel comics over my years. I don't know if I'm comfortable owning them anymore. I really don't. I'm now, and it might seem hypocritical, but tough, it is. And I'm saying to myself, I don't know if I want to. Maybe I just want to have trade paperbacks of these and that I can read and draw on and do whatever I want with, because there's no value to them. So, and then nobody's going to be making money off of these things down the road. It's a tough one. It's a real tough choice for me. And you know, maybe what I should do is I should host one of them there in YouTube live chats. Maybe I should do one of those where I can literally sit with this, and I can answer any questions for anybody who hasn't read these. And I can tell you, well, this is what I saw in these. And you can try to help me out and help me understand what I should do next. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I'll think about that. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk to you guys and walk through this and this. And really, wow. Intellectual property rights are so important. They're so important. And it's amazing how in an industry that was entirely based on intellectual property, nobody thought about this for so long. So sad. Well, everybody, that's my ramble for today. It's a long one. And for those of you who stuck it through, congratulations. You got to hear me ramble for, what is that, 7 minutes and 30 seconds there. And we're going to wrap this up. And if you have any other questions, we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.